Welcome to 4020 Not Live, he says, edit. Welcome to the programme. Another bank holiday Monday filled with no rugby league. And in fairness, we can't slag off rugby league when there's two England cricket teams playing at the moment, neither of which have got a fixture today. And it's actually, the weather's all right, which is a surprise. John Davidson is with us because it's a bank holiday. James Charlie's here as well. And Phil, I mean, what's it like not to work on a Monday, Phil? You just been sat around all day reading the paper.
Yeah, in my pajamas, as you do when you get to a certain... No, I'm joking. We've been feverishly catching up on all the admin, the editing, and obviously the planning of the next magazine. So it's been like any other working day. It's just you can wear your civvies.
Well, that is any working day to me. Is anything particularly newsworthy that you can think of to kick us off? Because I know there's plenty. John's once again has put together a big list with no doubt we'll miss half of them off. But anything
that's like getting into class and realizing that you didn't know there was homework to hand in. I haven't seen that. What I would say is, apart from Warrington's statement win in Catalan, which I thought was incredibly impressive, and I would put forward, because I know we debate it every now and again, who's been the best signing of the season. I'd throw Sam Powell in. I think he's been absolutely outstanding for Warrington in terms of he never lets the intensity drop when he goes on the field. But apart from that, I reckon Super League's been almost secondary this weekend to probably some other rugby that I've watched, which endorses your point that anybody can stream a game if they want to. I watched the Army and Cardiff in the Women's Southern Premiership, I think because you alerted me to it. I loved that. I mean, it was a low camera angle, but it was a really exciting game. Watched a fair bit of Greece and Norway men. Again, really close. And, you know, people can talk about standard all they like, but if you get two teams that, are virtually on parity, it's a great game to watch. I think what York did at Swinton, Newcastle deserve praise, I think, for how close they got to Rochdale, and Midlands won again. So I'll let James talk about Keighley, but I just think all the headlines probably haven't come in Super League this week.
Sorry, I was just smirking because Phil referenced that he'd been watching Norway and Greece men. That sounds like you need to check your internet history.
Specialist rugby league website.
Sorry for that. Lower in the show.
Oh, this program's been in the gutter for a long time. What was your highlight, James, of the weekend then? Apart from obviously not watching Norway and Greece.
Yeah, I've only seen one game this weekend. That was the game that I reviewed. That was Huddersfield against Lee, which was very forgettable. Not a particularly enjoyable game to watch. Quite high penalty counts. I think 4 yellow cards we had. It wasn't the best quality rugby league, but it's been a decent bank holiday.
Well, at least you got paid to watch it. John, you were at Castleford with their new big screen, weren't you?
I was, but I think my highlight was Carl Amor's phone going off live on the coverage. And the way the panel, Brian Carney was basically saying, "Yeah, you're not going to be on anymore, Carl, for that." I think that was a definite highlight for me.
I don't like how they don't pretend they're in France anymore. And it's like the illusion's gone now because he just wanders off and then he wanders back in, and we know he's not there anymore. It's a bit. Never mind. You can tell us all about the new Hull coach, John, because you've been across this story for however long Tony Smith's been out of the role. And who is the new man at Hull, and what's he going to bring to the club?
Well, I think older listeners would remember him as a top player in the 80s and 90s. The Penrith back row, played for New South Wales, played for the Kangaroos. I think he was on the 94 Kangaroo tour off the top of my head. And he did play for Salford in 97 and fondly remembered at Salford for his one season there. But yeah, from Penrith, very tough, uncompromising back row. But he's been coaching for a long time, reserve grade at Penrith, at the Roosters. He was the inaugural Gold Coast when they were reformed in 2007, the Titans, and did quite a good job. They got them one game from a grand final. I think he was there maybe 7 years or 5 years. And then he's been an assistant at the Broncos more recently. Funnily enough, he was assistant at Manly with Willie Peters under Trent Barrett. So that's a nice, they're quite good mates apparently. So that's a nice little journey. He was also the coach, just linking it back to Brian Carney. He signed Brian Carney for Gold Coast from Newcastle, and Brian Carney had one training session and then decided to quit and came back to England. So Yeah, I think he's a good appointment as coach. I think he's, as I said, a lot of experience. It was interesting his comments about making them fitter and tougher, because I think that's his kind of style. So that's a bit of maybe putting a few people on notice. But yeah, it's probably against. I think they publicly said they wanted a British coach, so that's not the case. But yeah, I think he could be a good signing for Hull FC.
The timing seems odd, though, because you would have thought with all the recruitment they've done and being linked with and are doing, that the new coach would have had a say in that, not least because if he wants to make them fitter, you wouldn't sign a lot of players that are in their early to mid-30s. Because as Adrian Lamb found very successfully with Lee last year, when you've got a squad where the top end age of them is quite high, you actually do less coaching. I think he was only having one major session a week, and most of the ones that he did were down to 40 minutes maximum. So it's going to be interesting how John Cartwright does that, but perhaps hasn't had a say today over who's coming in and what style they're going to play.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine he's had any say so far in recruitment, but I think that's the appointment. That's the reason for having a director of rugby. And I think that's the way other sports have already moved that way. And I think rugby league has in some ways, that you have, someone outside your CEO or your head coach who's in charge of recruitment. And then, a lot of clubs have a recruitment committee, at least in the NRL, they might have their CEO, the director of rugby, the head coach, and one other, the recruitment manager generally. So yeah, I think he'll have input, obviously, but he'll have a squad assembled for him. And I don't think Hull could really wait until they get a coach sorted. I mean, obviously it's the 1st of May, but everyone knows that recruitment's done much earlier than that. And players will be announced signings that they're moving clubs in September and October, but the real business is done well before that. So I think that's just, he'll have that'll be the card the hand of cards he's dealt with, should I say. And he'll, I think he'll be working them very hard in pre-season. I think that's a certainty.
Did I read that he was obviously, as a former Salford player, linked with the Salford job were Paul Rowley have gone to Hull?
Well, my understanding was that they would have been interested if Paul Rowley went, who, by all accounts, he was gone, and then he did a David Fafita style backflip. Yeah, they would have been quite happy to get him in. I think Kurt Haggerty was probably in line, but I think John Cartwright ticks all the boxes. I think probably the only downside is that he doesn't know the English game intimately at the moment, but obviously he did play over here for a season, and I'm sure he's got numerous contacts. I think he's 58. He's been around the game for a long time. I'm sure he's got connections across Super League. So. I think he would have been something that he's quite fondly regarded at Salford. I think, not looking from talking to fans and also officials at the club, they think highly of him. So I think he would have been someone they would have looked at if Paul Rowley did jump ship.
So obviously mentioning that they were looking at British coaches, and you sent out the tweet earlier. What do you want to talk about today? And everyone's saying, "What's Ross Smith still at Leeds?" Who's out there? Who is out there to take over any jobs? And not just Rowan Smith, but there are other coaches under pressure in Super. But who is out there at the moment who is looking for work, who is Super League quality, so to speak?
I'll let Phil answer that as the resident Rhinos tragic.
Well, if you're talking about coaches that are available, I think you are looking at assistants now, aren't you, in the NRL? The fact that Adrian Lamb has re-signed with Lee takes him off the market. Obviously highly regarded with what he did last year, and I think there was talk of the fact that Hull might have been interested in him at some stage. I just think it's a pointless discussion in many ways. It's a bit like Eric Ten Hag. I know nothing about football, but I gather Manchester United won the FA Cup this weekend. But all the questions weren't about congratulations, you've won one of the few major trophies that are available to a club. It was, why have you been so crap this year? So I think that's just what comes with coaching. We've seen Paul Wellens under criticism from some sections of the St Helens fans, which I've never really understood. And obviously we'll get to talk about how impressive they were on Friday night, particularly with 5 of their pack missing. absolutely dominated up front, which again may say more about the way Leeds are playing at the moment than Saints. But clearly, Paul Wellens, I think he's doing a fantastic job in that he's managing transition as well as having withdrawals from his squad that would be first choice players. So I'm not really interested in which coaches are available and which jobs they're at. I mean, clearly, the level of account you are held will depend which club you're at. And whilst I don't think there will be too much movement on Rowan Smith, I think he's now got a very interesting game on Saturday against Castleford, which again is at home, which will put increasing focus and pressure from the home fans on the way his team are playing. But I'd also throw into that mix, Huddersfield, which who James saw on Friday night, and you look now. I mean, the other big news today is Luke Yates again moving to Warrington, which I think says a hell of a lot about Warrington's recruitment at the moment. He is exactly the kind of player you would want to build a culture around in a team. So for him to be released by Huddersfield at the same time as Esan Masters has just been released to go to Salford, then I think those are the issues that we need to look at, rather than which coaches necessarily are on the market and whose job is under threat. That is the job of social media, and it'll never go away. You can be successful, and Sean Wayne won things at Wigan, and certain sections of the fans and the board didn't like the way he played. So in some ways, Gary Hetherington's the only person that can answer that, and I don't think there's a desire for change at the moment at Leeds.
I think the coaching, it's a bit of an emperor's new clothes. Everyone just thinks sack the coach, get in a new coach. They think there's this long list of experienced, talented coaches who get out there and turn things around instantly. It's kind of the culture we're in now, isn't it? And I don't think that's the case. I mean, if you look at the majority in rugby league, they're usually long-serving coaches who had the most success. Craig Bellamy at Melbourne, Trent Robertson at the Roosters, Steve McNamara at Catalans, and you do have other short-term appointments will work very well. Christian Wolf, Justin Holbrook, both at St Helens. But generally, it's long-term. Brian McDermott at Leeds, etc. So I don't think if you're looking in the English market, I don't think there's a number of head coaches out there who'd be ready to step into the job and do a fantastic job. I think Lieber is quite happy staying in Australia and coaching there. I don't think he's heading to Super League anytime soon, unless you take a risk on a championship coach. And I don't think history shows that not many Super League clubs are willing to do that. So I think people just want to sack coaches, much like in football. And unfortunately, there's not. And I wrote a piece on this recently. There's not a Portuguese or an Italian or a French or a Slovakian or a Swedish coach that you can just bring in rugby league, and they'll Sven Goran Eriksson around. So yeah,
not the coach of the Greek national team.
I think the interesting thing you mentioned there was Brian McDermott, because there are still Leeds fans that won't give him credit for what he achieved. He is the most successful coach the club have ever had, and I reckon some of those that threw mud his way would have him back tomorrow if it meant that the fortunes of the team were going to get to numerous grand finals and cup finals. So it's a very fickle business.
I think that's a good point with Brian McDermott, and I think there's some similarities with Rowan Smith, because I think some people just clearly don't like how he talks, how he answers questions, how he deals with the media. He probably doesn't give the answers that they want, and I think that's probably turned off quite. Just looking at online at the reaction, a lot of the fan base. You can put that to a side, though. He doesn't necessarily have to be the most vocal with the media or the most passionate or whatever if the team's winning. But sometimes you can buy a bit more time or a bit less pressure if you get fans on side or get the media on side, and he's probably got neither of those, I would say.
Just send Chev Walker to do the presses. That's what other clubs do. Get the assistant to do them. Just on the Huddersfield thing, we'll talk about that game, actually, seeing as we may as well. But Luke Yates going to Warrington, that's an upward move. You'd say Huddersfield to Warrington, that's going upwards. But Esan Masters going to Salford, that's a sideways move. And that's more worrying for Huddersfield than Salford, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Rich. I mean, I think it probably is a sideways move. I mean, if you look at the table, it's probably an upways move. I'm not sure. I know Huddersfield were trying to retain him. I think they'd offered him a new contract. I don't know what how much they were offering compared to what Salford were offering. But yeah, maybe it's just the the more appeal was perhaps the tight knit squad at Salford. The relationships he's got there. I'm not sure, but yeah, it is an interesting one. You're definitely right. I mean, if you look at where Warrington are and where Huddersfield are, Warrington are a bigger club who are at the higher end of the table, and I'm sure there's the Sam Burgess law as well, playing under him. So, yeah, I think recruitment is an interesting one. People move clubs for lots of different reasons, or don't move. Sometimes because they don't want to live in Hull. But sometimes it's the size of the contract, or it might be just a case of I want to win some silverware, and not being disrespectful to Huddersfield, but obviously Warrington have got a much better chance of winning silverware in the next 18 months than the Giants do.
We know what the word challenge means, though. When any player say they're going for the challenge, we know exactly what that means. How was Huddersfield League, James? I dipped into all three games on Saturday night, sat at home, on Friday night rather, sat at home. But you had to watch this. You were paid to watch this. So what did you take away from this one?
Thankfully, I was paid to watch it. Otherwise, I may have switched off or flicked to another game. Probably, I didn't actually watch it live. I mean, in fairness to Huddersfield, they had 2 tries disallowed for obstruction, but rightly so. And ultimately lost game by 6 point margin. So, arguably, they could have won that game. The game was in the balance, I suppose. It wasn't a quality performance from either team, and I'm sure both coaches will be seeking improvement going into this next week. But ultimately, Lee got the points, and I think it means that Huddersfield are still yet to win at home this year, which is remarkable, really. But I think the other thing that was interesting in that game was the non-selection of Jake Connor, and I think it picks up on Phil's comments last week that I think there's been a fallout behind the scenes there. I think the players have pretty much said, we don't want to play with you at the moment. If you're going to carry on behaving like that, I suspect that's where that's come from. I may be wrong, but I think it must have come to a head last week, and a statement's clearly been made. But ultimately, they went on and lost that game this weekend. I can't remember who they play this coming week, but the pressure must be on Huddersfield with the amount of money that they will have spent last year and this year, and they've not changed. They've not really turned it around. I mean, there's a number of sides when you look at that table. Salford are in 6 on 14. Leeds, despite all the noise, are only just outside that top 6 on 12 points, and Huddersfield on 10 with Lee in 9th position on 9 points. There's quite a number of sides in that middle band of the table that are all sort of competing for almost mediocrity in some ways, but to get into that top 6.
I know we live in a clickbait world, so I shouldn't be surprised this. But when I read the headlines on Friday, shockers, Jake Connor's dropped, thinking, well, have you not seen him in the last few weeks? It's not a shock. Should it be a shock if he was picked? I don't know.
I think the other player that's caught my attention over the last few weeks is, and I can't remember his first name, is Wallace, the young lad that's played for Huddersfield. He's made an impression, not always necessarily for the right reasons. So, and that's what some of the things that you get, with a young, inexperienced player. But somebody like Jake Connor, ultimately, you'd like to think that he may have matured out of some of those antics, but he's going to face a choice now, isn't he? He's obviously, there's conversations going on behind the scenes as to how he actually is going to play, and he will get back in the side at some point because they need his talent, but they need it to be controlled and measured.
They play Hull on Friday night. Johnny, you saw Hull against Castleford last Friday. 3 wins now for Cass, and the talk on this podcast, the talk from Cass fans throughout the season has been they're happy with the effort that's been put in. Obviously, the results weren't there. Now they're starting to win games. It sounded like it was a bit of a grind in the end on Friday, but they won.
Yeah, they were good. They deserved their win. I mean, Liam Horn didn't shit himself. Apologies the language, which is also a plus. But no. In all seriousness, they were very good. I thought Rowan Mills had a fantastic game. They had Paul McShane at in the halves, and Horn played the full 80 minutes hooker, so it wasn't sort of a perfect scenario in terms of their spine. But yeah, they deserved their victory, and yeah, I think they have. They picked up a few wins. That St Helens game a couple of weeks ago was embarrassing, but I think there's definitely a good spirit there, and I think they are trying. They're just in a lack of talent on paper against the vast majority of clubs. They've admitted that. So. They deserve their victory, and I think they'll give Leeds a good shake this weekend. That'll be quite an interesting game. I think, the way Leeds have been travelling, that Leeds need to put on a performance. But I think Castleford could pose them some problems.
I think the interesting thing as well is that you mentioned there aren't many coaches in the Championship that clubs would take a risk on. Well, Craig Lingard clearly, is the opposite of that model, and it is starting to work, because I think he said right at the very beginning, they're probably not going to get consistency this year. There is going to be a lot of personnel change. There's players out of contract. Each coach has an idea of how they want to play and which players suit that style the best. And so whenever you get a new coach in, there's going to be that transition period. But you can already see that working with what he's got, he's starting to get, I don't know if it's the best out of them, but he's starting to get a little bit more out of them that would be recognisable to Castleford fans, which is all you can ask at this stage. So I think, maybe some clubs perhaps should look at the Championship and see if there's obviously somebody there, who could do a job for them. It shouldn't be an avenue that's automatically closed off.
Yeah, I'll qualify what I said before. I wasn't saying that they shouldn't look at the Championship. I think, you look at, obviously Darryl Powell, who came through. You look at Ian Watson. I think he was at Swinton before, he was an assistant at Salford and got the job. I think, being an actual head coach as opposed to just being an assistant and getting a head job is probably a much better pathway. But it just seems that's the way the clubs look at it, look at the Championship. But yeah, I'm sure there are some coaches who could do a very good job in Super League. It's probably a shame there isn't more given that opportunity.
As you've mentioned, that Castleford play Leeds on Saturday. It's kind of like flowing from one thing to another. It's working this week. Hopefully I'll be back from Sheffield on time to see this game at 5:30. Leeds versus Castle. But Leeds, I don't understand it, Phil. St Helens, they're quite good, right? They're joint top of the table. And Leeds, they're not good at the minute. Why would anyone think Leeds? I know Rodster will say that any result is possible. And that's true. That is true. Why would anyone think that Leeds are going to go to St Helens and get anything out of that game? And did they look like they could? I guess is the more important question.
If you just take the first 10 minutes, yes, they were the better team. But clearly, in an 80-minute game, that doesn't buy you very much. I think when the team sheets came through and Saints effectively had 5 forwards out, if you include Ignatius Parsi as well, even though he hasn't played all season, he would be in the 17 if he was fit. Then I think there was a feeling that it should be more competitive than it turned out to be. And one of the things that Leeds have done this year is in virtually every game, mainly to the latter stages, they've been competitive. They even at Catalan the last time they played, it was 14-0 until 4 minutes from time, ended up 26. Looked on paper to those that didn't watch it, a less committed performance than perhaps the result would suggest. But that wasn't there this week, and I think they have to take the criticism for that. The forwards didn't take up the challenge. I think highlighted in most of the reports after the game, George Delaney, who is 20 years old, came on after 6 minutes when a 6 Saints forward went down in Bachelor and absolutely dominated the Leeds pack. Delaney's at the very start of his career. He's a bit raw, but he's got that kind of just go forward, never say die kind of spirit that's inbred in that St Helens Academy system that at the moment Leeds don't have. If you were looking for unfortunates, then losing another outside back, which had just taken on loan, didn't help Leeds. That's about 100 this year. And I think there was a study done this week about how important the outside backs are now in making ground, even perhaps more than prop forwards. So that's disruptive, but doesn't excuse the final score. There was a moment, but it was so early in the game that it didn't determine the match, that Matt Frawley intercepted from a Lewis Dodd kick and looked to get a pass away to Ash Handley, which if he had, the pitch was clear in front of Handley. The likelihood is he would have scored. That would have made it 10-0, possibly 12-0. It's a turning point moment in a game, but too early to say it influenced the result. The execution was poor. The pass didn't go to hand. It went to Tommy Magnuson. Frawley then becomes the player again who is the scapegoat for everything that's wrong with Leeds. But again, blame the coach if you want, but it wasn't he who didn't execute the pass. It wasn't he who dropped a high ball that led to a try. It wasn't he who didn't stand up and play the ball correctly. that led to another try. So it wasn't a great Leeds performance. It was a really good St Helens performance. And the trouble is when you're only looking for one story, you miss the other one.
The only thing can I just chip in here? The only thing I'd say there is that I think Warrington was a good example last year in that Warrington started the season with eight wins, didn't they, on the bounce? Same team, same squad, suddenly nosedived. Now there was obviously a reason for that, and that was something that was going on behind the scenes to do with the the relationship between the players and the coach. And I think if you're a Leeds fan and you've signed Brodie Croft, you've signed Andy Ackers, and you've seen how they performed last year under a different coach, yes, with different players around them, but I suppose the question is why are they not performing to the level that they did last year? Is that a combination of the coach and the way that the club or the team is run? Is it a combination of the player that you've got around you? It probably is. It is a number of factors, but I think that's one of the frustrations that you've seen that they have got some talent. They signed some talent this year, and it's not really shining through.
I think it's more to do with the lack of go forward in front of them. I don't know a halfback in any team that can dominate behind a beaten pack. And too often this season, the Leeds pack has looked second to a more sizable unit that they've come up against, and that happened again on Friday night. Croft in those early stages, particularly with the shallow kick that he put in again that led to Hanley's try. It's another assist, if you like, that he's been renowned for this season. What he can't do is do it for the 80 minutes if all he's being asked to do is either kick the ball or run the ball in his own 30 or 40 metre line. So, I think the Ackers situation probably still needs resolving. They've tried Jared O'Connor as the starting halfback and Ackers off the bench. It'll be very interesting to see what they do this week because they've now had enough weeks to have a look at that and decide which they think works best. I think Ackers starting probably is the right option. But the forwards just need to do more. And yes, they're missing some, as indeed are every club. But I'm not sure that Brodie Croft and in some ways Matt Frawley can shoulder all the responsibility if they've got nothing to play behind.
It's all if they picked Jack Sinfield, then he wouldn't have intercepted that ball and something else would have gone wrong. I don't know. That game on Saturday, are we expecting Castleford's pack, you haven't seen them, John, on Friday, to be more, I don't know if enthusiastic is the word, but get on top of Leeds and then cause them even more problems?
Well, I think there are definitely a chance to. I'm sure they've identified the weakness in the Leeds pack and will be looking to exploit that. Yeah, I think we could probably do a whole episode on Leeds, maybe a series of episodes. But I think the recruitment for a number of a while, their recruitment and retention, Fustatua, Lachlan Miller, Lasoni, what happened with Nene McDonald, Blake Austin, I think it's been a bit ramshot for quite a few years. I'll be surprised to see. I mean, Leeds could sneak in and get sixth at the end of the season, but I'll be surprised to see that.
Let's take a break and we'll come back and praise Saints because we probably haven't done that enough yet. And it's been a bad week for Leeds and Saints. Obviously, men, women, academy, football, just not good. But funny to everyone else. So we'll talk about that. And we got Wigan, they're top of the table, along with Warrington, because they beat Catalans, and everything else that went on in Rugby League this week. Still to come here in the second half of 4020 NOT Live. Welcome back to all the people who have joined us. For the second half of 4020 Not Live, we're talking about St Helens because they're top of the league on points difference. Anything else to add about their men on Friday, Phil, apart from doing it obviously without half of their team, it seems, and Jack Welsby being his usual Jack Welsby self?
I think, again, losing Johnny Lomax at half time and still being dominant in the second half was a credit to them. I can't speak too highly of the way they approach the game, the way they bring juniors in, the way they assimilate into the system. I know there's a lot of noise about they don't play enough attractive rugby, but they showed so many signs on Friday night that they can and they will. And I still think don't rule them out. The fact that some of their other likely rivals at the end of the season have got cup finals and they've got to manage all of that. Then yeah, I think we've now our top three, and I think we've had a top three all year. Saints and Wigan have been in it from the beginning. I think possibly on the result we saw at the weekend, Warrington are ahead of Catalan with where we are at the moment. But it's going to take a mighty performance to dislodge one of those three from winning the grand final.
That week off, John, how important is that to them? Because obviously they had a week off last week to prepare for this game. They'll have another week off next week when Wigan and Warrington, the two teams around them in the table, have got a slightly big game at Wembley. With all the injuries around, how important is that extra week's rest at this time of year?
Yeah, I think the extra week's rest is really important, and it's a big benefit. But it is interesting just what Phil was saying there, and I agree. I think Catalans just seem to have slipped off the pace a little bit. They seem to be struggling to score points. You know, they're still a very talented team, and you know, defensively hard to break down, but they just seemed a little bit less polish in those tight contests in recent weeks. So I think they're still up there, but it has been interesting to see Warrington kind of go from strength to strength, you know, particularly in the Challenge Cup semi-final, but then, you know, very, very tough game over there in Perpignan. And, you know, I think they're quite well primed for Wembley. You know, I think it's going to be a great game, Wigan and Warrington. You know, the kind of Sam Burgess element, but also just how fantastic Wigan are playing at the moment. You know, watch the game, the Salford game, even though the weather turned quite mad. That was my other highlight of the weekend, that you could actually hear the rain on the speakers, even though I was in Yorkshire watching the game over there. But yeah, Wigan just look, you know, near unbeatable at the moment. Yeah.
Raining Manchester. What's the worst weather you've refereed in, James? Because you must have had some lovely conditions over the years.
No, I don't know. Everything really in this country, you get everything, don't you? From snow and hail. Hail's pretty bad, isn't it? To try and look through hail. Fog. I can't remember whether I've been involved in a game at Odsal. There've been plenty of games at Odsal where there was plenty of fog. I don't know. Any excuse to not see what's happening in front of me.
I would imagine fog would be an interesting one for a referee.
Oh, I had plenty of games where I had fog in my eyes.
Just you know, use your instinct to decide whether the season's going to be right or not.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I'm wearing glasses, isn't there, on this? But I mean, it's a podcast, people can't tell. But if you're watching, you can. I mean, without these glasses, I can't see much. So I did wear contact lenses just so people, are wondering.
I'll just cut that bit out. That's all right. Also on Friday in St Helens, Phil. St Helens beat Leeds 12-6 in the Women's Super League. St Helens ahead going into the Challenge Cup final in a couple of weeks. Faye Gaskin scored the 12 points for St Helens. Kira Bennett scored the 6 points for Leeds, including one of the most amazing conversions anyone's ever seen of both posts over. Faye Gaskin, if I could have had a bet on who's going to be the player of the match at the Challenge Cup final, which of course hasn't got a name, I'd probably be backing her at the moment because she's in fine form, as our sense.
It's a great game. I think there's a lot to commend in the women's game at the moment, and that was arguably one of the clashes of the weekend. I don't think you can read too much into it, other than St Helens' goal line defence was absolutely admirable. Particularly early on, Leeds had 2 tries chalked off quite rightly for players not being able to get the ball down. And Leeds have got a couple of big names still to come back in as well that didn't play this week. So just sets it up to be a brilliant Wembley. And it'd be very interesting this week. It's Saints Wigan, isn't it, in as a curtain raiser before the men play Catalan. And all the clubs that are at Wembley this week will have that big decision to make. Do you go for continuity and keep that essence of what's got you to Wembley going? Or do you rest all your star players in case they either get an HIA or a disciplinary issue in the men's case? And be very, very interesting to see if we get 2 academy teams in the men's when Wigan play Warrington this week. I wouldn't be surprised if both of those women's teams, who are obviously going to Wembley the week after, resting a lot of players as well. But Wembley itself was set up really nicely by that women's game. If only all the Leeds fans who were stuck on the M62 had got there in time to see the beginning of it.
It was, I tell you what, I keep praising Faye Gaskin all the time, but how she was able to just keep talking and talking and talking after the match on Sky, she was superb, as was Vicky Whitfield in that one. Elsewhere, Barrow 22, Featherstone 10, Barrow's first win in Super League. Sounded a great game on the radio. Lots of violence and stuff in that one, so that was good. I'm bored, John, already. Huddersfield 12, York 50. And credit to York here because they're still without players. They took 2 on loan from Sheffield on dual reg, which I'm sure when that announcement was made at the start of the season, it was supposed to be the other way around. But a couple of Sheffield players playing for York and winning convincingly against Huddersfield, and Wigan beating Warrington 40 points to 4. So their good start to the season continues as well. As Phil mentioned, Saints Wigan on Friday. That's the curtain raiser for the Saints Catalans game. Saturday, big game, Featherstone versus Huddersfield. Leeds versus Barrow is on before the Leeds Castleford game. And I'm going to guess on Sunday, York Warrington's on just before York play Widnes in the Championship, of course, ahead of Wembley the week after. Catalans and Warrington. So we're now under this theory that's been brought up on this programme, John, that Catalans perhaps off things at the minute. But not to take anything away from Warrington, by the way, because we'll praise them in a moment, but any particular reasons why Catalans aren't where they were perhaps earlier this year and the end of last?
No, I must admit I'm not sure why. It's just more of a feeling than anything. I mean, they've been in some very tough games, and I don't think that, I'd have to check the score lines, but I don't think they've been flogged or dominated by anyone. But just their attack doesn't seem to be flowing as well perhaps as it has in the past. They seem to have moved around. They've had a few injuries, but moved around different players in the spine, whether Nicarima has been starting or off the bench or a hooker. I think McAloram's been missing for a few games, whether that's an impact. But they just seem to perhaps be not as fluent as they were early on. But Warrington, well deserved. The third time they've played them, managed to get the win this time. And I think they were over in the south of France for 4 or 5 days. So I mean, it sounds like a great trip for the Warrington players. That would have been nice and relaxed and acclimatized going to that game.
I was looking at Warrington and listening to the Brian Bevan podcast last week, and they're always talking about the Burgess effect and stuff, but Matty Ashton's try-scoring record at the minute is superb, and again, he scored another one on Saturday night. Got to be in or remaining in the England squad whenever that's announced for those for that mid-season test against France.
You'd think so, yeah. You'd think he'd be, certainly in that squad. I mean, I think there's a few wingers obviously who'll be pushing for claims. Obviously, Mr. Young down the Roosters won't be flying over. So there's definitely one wing spot, and you'd think Ryan Hall has played his last games for England. I think Matty Ashton would be a great shout. I mean, there's a few players. I think someone who's been fantastic recently is Junior Nsemba. He just seems to be getting better and better, and surely he's going to be, if not for this game, but by the end of the year, he's a huge talent.
Mischievously, I should say that Sean Wayne should pick the 2 Toms from Catalans because it'll save on airfare. Won't have to fly him there and back.
I think Nsemba deserves to be picked because of the song that the Wigan fans have created about him. They deserve enormous credit for that. There's one of their songs that they sing continually that I don't think does the game a lot of favours, which other clubs have now picked up on. Didn't sound particularly great on the BBC during the semi-final, but that one, fantastic. Whoever came up with that, take an extra chocolate biscuit because, but he is in great form. On the Catalan, I think what was evidenced when you watch that game was how good George Williams is at the moment, and when he is in the form that he's in, the rest of the team function. It's almost like putting oil in a car engine. That if you've got the right amount and it's fresh, then it brings the best out of the other parts around it. The word that everybody has to use, I think it's contractually obliged these days, is clunky. And for me, Catalan, Theo Farge is new to the setup there. He possibly hasn't made the impact yet that I think he will. But also Jordan Abdul came in very, very late. He's got a fantastic kicking game. But I think if you prep the team to reduce the space that he's got to work in, he becomes less of a creator. I think it's, I wouldn't in any way say he's one-dimensional, but his kicking game is his greatest asset. And if you put enough pressure on that, it tends to blunt the rest of the Catalan attack as well. They were unlucky that Nicarima had to play in the centre, I think, when Romano went off injured. But the over-reliance on McAloram statistically, and possibly Mike McMeekan, who didn't play either, would be a concern, because obviously McMeekin's going and McAlorum won't be there for that much longer.
We can't forget they had Sam Tompkins and Mitchell Pearce in the spine last year, as well as Tyrone May. But you take out those three players, there is going to be an impact, and they just had that years of experience, just to a calming effect to manage the game at the right times, and maybe they just don't have that to the highest percentages they did. Just to note also, who was great for Warrington is Matty Nicholson. Looks like he's off to Canberra as they continue their affection for English players, Ricky Stewart. So that's a bit of a blow for Warrington, but I think it does. It's another indicator of that the English system is certainly producing top talent. Phil mentioned George Delaney, who South Sydney apparently been quite keen on, and I'm sure he's got a few admirers. So I think he's locked down contract-wise. Not that stops anyone these days. But yeah, I'm sure there's Shane Richardson from West Tigers is in the UK at the moment, so I'm sure there's a few promising young players being looked at by cashed-up NRL clubs.
West trying to get rid of everyone, aren't they, and palm them off on
everyone? Well, they're trying to offload players, but I think they'll be looking at some young players as well. I think, if you look at George Delaney or you look at Madison, whether they want the next Sam Burgess or the next, George Burgess or whoever, you look at what Dom Young's done. There's numerous examples in there, and they're just looking for the right character. A young player who's eager to work hard and prove themselves, and it's the minimum wage or the wage that they're offering is not much for an NRL club, and it's usually a lot more than they're on in Super League. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, I think, for a lot of these young players.
Now we're a week away from Wembley. We're talking about Wigan in a moment, and we've alluded to the fact that Warrington and Wigan, what kind of teams they're going to put out this week. At this point, James, do those who will be working at Wembley know, or are you building up to this week thinking, I've got to do my best to get that gig?
No, they won't know. They'll find out probably either Monday afternoon or probably more likely Tuesday. In terms of the match officials, so the match officials will be going into this next weekend, making sure that they're performing to the best of their ability to be in the frame to be selected. But I mean, given that the two semi-finals were refereed by Liam Moore and Chris Kendall, you'd have to suggest that it'd be one of those two referees that would referee the final, barring two disastrous performances this coming weekend. So yeah, it's very much a case of wanting to come through this coming weekend as well as you possibly can do.
I mean, obviously, I would ask the player the same thing, but you can't go into the game this weekend thinking, I can't make any mistakes. That's going to put you on edge, isn't it?
No, I mean, in days gone by, they used to send us, like, I think it was the 2008 Challenge Cup final that I was sent with the touch judge. So we were selected the week before, and we were sent to Whitehaven to officiate Whitehaven against whoever it was, and it was just utter chaos. The referee on that occasion decided to cause mayhem in order to to keep the teams in line the following week at Wembley. So those days are long gone, and also the days where you can actually referee a game in Super League and not be on TV are gone. So there is no hiding place. There is no hiding place at all. So whoever's selected this weekend have got to make sure that they perform, and that's the same week in, week out, in fairness. But it doesn't really come into your reckoning. I think it just gives you an extra focus.
Good job they don't do that in podcasting, I think, because we'd all have been sad. Well, I would have been years ago. I'm still here because I'm the only one who knows how to work it.
Just on match officiating selection, when it comes to the Women's Challenge Cup final and even the 1895, is there a temptation, do you think, sometimes by those who are making the appointments to give it a big name rather than an official who's officiated in that competition for the season and perhaps would understand the tactics and the players better?
It's a perennial debate. I mean, I know the year I did the Challenge Cup final, me and Liam Moore did two semi-finals in the men's competition. I was selected to referee the final and the men's final, and Liam was selected to referee the 1895. And it's very much been whoever misses out on the semi in terms of the men's final gets the 1895. And I can see the arguments both ways. It rewards those referees if you're selected because you referee in that competition to referee that major final. But equally, if you're a team in that competition, you probably want the best official on that game to referee that game with the most experience. And so I think ultimately that's where the match officials sort of heads have fallen down, really. So I suspect that will remain. Whoever probably misses out on the men's Challenge Cup final will probably end up refereeing the 1895. As for the women's, that's been slightly different. It's probably, I don't know who did it last year. I think it's been a full-time referee, but somebody of lesser experience. So it may have been James Vella or Liam Rush that sort of refereed last year and maybe the year before. But they've now both refereed in Super League now a number of times. So I don't know who will referee that game. It could be somebody featuring, that we've not, with a less familiar name. It gives them an experience. I mean, having said that, for all the games I did, I never actually refereed at Wembley. I touch judged a number of times at Wembley, but never actually refereed a game there.
I think, and I may be wrong, Phil, because you were there and I was watching at home, the referee in the Saints Leeds game, the women's game, he didn't go to the video referee once, did he?
No, I'm not. What's more, his name wasn't on the team sheet, and nobody knew who he was. Which again tells you that sometimes it's better not knowing who the match official is, rather than. Yeah, I'd say somebody like Aaron Belafonte, who I've seen refereeing quite a lot of the women's games over the last maybe couple of years, seems to be making his way in the officiating ranks. I think deserving of somebody who perhaps is learning their trade in that competition. I think it'd be great for them to have that experience of refereeing at the National Stadium.
Interestingly, on the Five Live podcast, sorry for plugging another podcast, Phil Bentham was on that podcast in the last week or so, and listened to his comments about the women's competition, suggesting that I think really following the football model, that if you're a football referee, you select which competition you officiate in. But I think in the longer term, you're probably going to look to select a group of officials that will just officiate in the women's competition. But for now, I don't think we're in that position, that luxurious position where you've got lots of officials to be able to divide them.
Luke Bland, the referee on Friday. I think Marcus Griffiths was the video referee, so had a very easy afternoon. Just put his feet up, have a cup of tea. I don't know what they do with it.
Give him half his feedback if he's not asked to do anything.
Yeah. Sometimes it works both ways, isn't it? Some days you're called into action constantly, and other days it's a nice easy one. But you always wish for it to be a quiet one.
Wigan, top of the Women's Super League, joint top of the Men's Super League. John, 26 winners over Salford. As you say, you watch this on the telly, enjoying the rain. You didn't have to go out into the rain. You could watch it from home. An interesting game.
Yeah, I mean, I think Wigan were pretty dominant at 18-0. It looked like it was all over. First 30 minutes was completely one-way traffic. I think Salford did get back into the game a bit. Probably the rain and the conditions helped them. Wigan, there was a few more handling errors, but Wigan just looked kind of indestructible at the moment. Just got such a high-performing squad, so many threats across the park. They've got the depth when they've had some serious injuries like Willie Ice, so they can bring in someone like in December. It's just a well functioning, high functioning machine.
It's like when Saints won 4 in a row. You find you can't really say anything more about them because they're just good and everyone's good and they're doing things well. And that's where Wigan are at the moment, because they go away from home, they win by 20 points, and there's nothing. With Leeds, we can talk, as you say, we can talk for hours because we can slag everything off. But at Wigan, everything's working. At Saints,
analyze, Rich. Analyze, not
analyze. Sorry, analyzing. Sorry, that's why we're not on the telly. Much like the other game on Sunday, which again, probably most people are stuck with the Salford game because it was London 14, Hull KR 64, 46-0 up at half time, and again, it's a result we expected.
No, I mean, I flicked a little bit between the two, but the first time I flicked over, I think was 4 minutes in, it was already 6-0, and then flicked over and it was about 30. I'm just surprised they didn't rest more players. I think, with respect to London, though, it seemed like Hull KR, you probably want to, rest a few players and, rotate your squad. Obviously, I think Matt Parcell started when, usually he's on the bench and Litton gets more minutes. But, I think you would have probably tried to plug a few youngsters in there because, London may have beaten Hull FC and, everyone got all excited and everything. But, how many more wins are they going to get? And I think, as the Hull FC game showed on Friday, they're a very bad team. Yeah.
I think the important thing for Hull KR was that they needed to hit back, and they did. So that would be the first thing that Willie Peters would have wanted to see. They now need to beat a top team on a more regular basis to put them back into that sort of three that we talked about at the beginning of the programme. And I guess the other thing about Hull KR is that they would have perhaps wanted to go on with it a little bit. If there is one criticism of them this year, it's that they've had some really good first half performances and then fallen away a little bit in the second half in terms of the score. That's not, again, taking anything away from London. And again, the motivation of the players when you go in 46-0 at half time is not necessarily to double that in the second half. But the ruthless teams that win things actually do stuff like that. So yeah, I suspect that Willie Peters will be happy that they're back on the horse, but they'll want it to gallop a bit faster.
This week, Friday night, Huddersfield Hull, St Helens Catalans. Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, Warrington versus Wigan. At 5:30, Hull KR Lee and Leeds Castleford. On Sunday, Salford versus London. The good news is they've put the Wheelchair Challenge Cup final back an hour, so Wigan fans can watch them both, probably on the telly, because I don't know if you'd be able to get from Sheffield to Warrington. But 1 o'clock kickoff, I think, at the EIS in Sheffield.
2:30, I think. The other thing that, I mean, you mentioned the fixtures there, I cannot understand, and I know that a lot of them were scheduled before we had this deal where every game was going to be shown live. But if you're going to have a game at 5:30 on a Saturday and it's going to be on BBC Two, why would you schedule another game at 5:30 on Saturday? I do not get it, because the only thing that's going to do is harm your potential viewing audience. Self-destructive of the worst kind.
In the
I think generally with these though, Phil, it's not, people blame Sky, but it's not Sky, is it? It's the clubs who are making these decisions. So yeah, I mean, the scheduling has been poor for years, and it continues to be.
In relation to scheduling, if it's an amendment to it's a fixture amendment, they have to seek approval from, I don't know if it's the RFL, Rugby League Commercial, I don't know which, I think probably the RFL in this case, and that obviously that has to be approved. But if both clubs have agreed to it, they tend to sort of rubber stamp it. But I think this is where it does need a far better coordinated approach, and I'd like to think that next year, knowing now with this broadcast deal is in place, that the clubs can align a little bit better.
I think the thing with the schedule too, we're heading into round 13 in Super League. Wigan haven't played Warrington yet, but they've already played 12 games. So Warrington have played Catalans 3 times already. I mean, it just kind of, I mean, I don't know, Leeds have played St Helens 3 times, and one of those was in the Cup, but it really seems, the schedule seems quite odd.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Rugby League Commercial ZX Spectrum overheated when it was doing the fixtures at the start of the season. So it's in for fixing. So hopefully they can get a new one. Maybe upgrade to a 128. I don't know.
I heard they were using the post office system.
Oh,
That's a joke, by the way, to all my RFL ex-colleagues. I mean, it must be an absolute logistical nightmare, because so many clubs play at football grounds, and then there's you can't play at certain grounds on certain dates or periods, and it just must be a logistical nightmare. But hopefully it can be better.
I'll just point out, because we're on YouTube, if we do get any adverts in the breaks for political parties, that's not put there by us. They're not by us. This program is apolitical. I think that's the word I'm looking for.
Is it the What's Doing party by Mario Fennick?
So it's not
straight over our heads. I think
that was actually you remember Mario Fennick, Phil?
Very well.
North Sydney. Yeah, North Sydney. He actually
boxing brother.
In the New South Wales state elections, they actually created a party for the footy show called the What's Doing party. It was a real thing. Look it up.
Yeah, but not as good as Ronnie the Rhino, who did actually stand for election in 1997 and didn't lose his deposit. Got quite a lot of the Headingley student vote, as I remember. The only other thing I was going to say about fixture scheduling is all that this year has shown is that loop fixtures are, something that the game has to get a handle on. And one of the reasons that Warrington are playing Catalan 3 times in 12 weeks is because we've got ridiculous loop fixtures. Get rid of them, and then that's one of your fixture issues that doesn't become one.
In the Championship, Barrow, double win for them, because they beat Featherstone the women and the knee men's 25 points to 12. Batley 21, Bradford 20. What a game that sounds like it was. Where's the highlights? Where can I watch them?
There's some remarkable results in the Championship. I was looking yesterday. I think almost every one except probably one is a surprise result, I think.
Well, I mean, I would have fancied Doncaster with the way they're playing, the way Halifax are, but Halifax blitzed them 34 points to 8. Sheffield beating Dewsbury 36-13 on Friday night. By the way, go to the Twitter feed of Sheffield Eagles. They've had a local student that's made a film about them, and it's well worth 20 minutes of your time to watch, and something other clubs should get doing as well. Swinton 22, York 30. 22-0 up with 20 minutes left. 12 minutes left, whatever it was. I don't know what happened. What happened? How did that happen?
I think Swinton had a player sent off, and York decided they were going to move the ball. And did it? How you score 5 converted tries in just over 12 minutes? I have no idea.
Toulouse 28, Widnes 20. I watched that on Saturday, as well as the Catalans Warrington game, because I could get the French TV coverage, and that was good. And Whitehaven 6, Wakefield 30. This week, Wakefield Dewsbury on Friday night. Saturday, Halifax Toulouse. Sunday, Batley Sheffield, Bradford Barrow, Doncaster Whitehaven, Featherstone Swinton, York Widnes. And in League One, Hunslet beating Cornwall 42-16. That sounded very close for much of that one before Hunslet pulled away. What a win for Keighley, 18-0 up at half-time and completing a 28-18 win over Oldham. We said that one would be good going into that one. And what a victory for the Cougars.
Yeah, remarkable. I mean, that was a big game for the Cougars because they've already lost one game this year, having been beaten by Hunslet at home. So I think they did need to pull that one back. So it was a good result for them.
Midlands bouncing back from defeat last week to beat North Wales 18-10 and Newcastle 18, Rochdale 24. And obviously Newcastle moving back to their old home in Gateshead and getting more and more competitive, which I think you mentioned at the start, Phil. He can only be good. Can only be good.
I mean, 6-point margin, that must be their closest defeat by a long, long stretch.
And they travel to Cornwall
or Newcastle, but it could maybe a combination of both. But yeah, good to see.
You talk as well about the impact of coaches, and anybody who thought Chris Thorman, just because Newcastle were back in the league, was going to have an instant impact. Clearly, I can't remember who I was talking to. Clyde Griffiths. A wonderful man who has got a fantastic playing and coaching record, a dual international as a player and a coach, which doesn't happen that often. He'll be featured in the next issue of the magazine as My Life in League. I was speaking to him yesterday, and he was saying that any coach that takes over any club in, he said September, so at the end of a season with a close season to work with, he said you're not going to see any impact of what they can possibly do for at least 6 months. So I think when we started with the coaching debate, that's worth throwing into the mix as well. And certainly with regard to Newcastle, if Chris Thorman can now get them more confident. I looked at their team this morning in the paper. Still don't recognise many of the names. It's not like they've taken a lot of players on dual reg from other Super League and Championship clubs. If he is starting to build something there, then he deserves a round of applause from everybody.
Cornwall, Newcastle, Midlands, Keighley, North Wales, Oldham, and Workington Hunslet. The games on Sunday afternoon, all kicking off at various times. As mentioned, Wheelchair Challenge Cup final Saturday afternoon. It's on the BBC website. Wigan versus Catalans will be a tough game for Wigan, obviously having lost to Catalans in the European Club final a couple of months ago, but we'll see how they do in that one, and hopefully I'll be there, so we'll bring you some reaction from that. At least, Catalans have one person who speaks English, so that's good. John, on your list of things, what do you want to talk about before we run out of time?
Well, I don't think we've talked actually about that much of them, but I'm quite looking forward to State of Origin. Obviously, the teams have been named. A lot of players missing through injury. I think it's going to be quite an interesting series because there's so many debutants and so many big names out. Nathan Cleary, Latrell Mitchell, Big Tino, Cameron Munster, etc., etc. But a lot of debutants, a lot of surprise selections. I think Selwyn Cobbo on the bench. Considering the form that he's been in, and the fact that you've put a winger on the bench is unusual. But yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to State of Origin game 1. I'm sure Phil is with his Cane Tone allegiances.
Yeah, you just prepare to have your heart broken. If the Maroons,
you're wearing a blue hoodie, Phil. You're wearing a blue hoodie.
Don't like blue. If the Maroons can't get Ezra Mann in their starting lineup, then clearly you need to be worried.
Well, I think I actually think it's probably the right selection. If you look at Tom Dearden, he's already played Origin. But I mean, Ezra Mann's in fantastic form. They've got, Queensland always cry, we don't have enough players, we don't have the big talent pool. They've got players coming out of their elbows. But I think Tommy Dearden, you look at that cover tackle he did earlier in the season, and he's very tough, isn't he? Like he's not as flashy as man, but he's just got a built for that Origin arena. But I mean, James Tedesco getting dropped, the Australian New South Wales captain. I think he played 22 Origins in a row. New coach in Malcolm Maguire. It's new captain in Jake Drabovic. It's going to be fascinating.
Should they send Super League referees over there, James, to officiate it? Because they're neutral.
They have done in years gone by, but God, that's a long time ago. I think, I mean, it would be a fantastic experience, but there's zero chance of that happening.
Less than 0% chance of that. Is Phil Gould going to tell me all their big strong boys? Because he was keen to tell me they're all big strong girls last week. So I'm keen to learn about the men of New South Wales and Queensland on the weekend.
I think the only other thing to bring up, I can't remember if it was on John's list, because if I'm honest, I didn't see John's list. He does need to realise we don't structure this programme. We don't have a running order. Apart from Matty Nicholson's interesting. I think we probably will come back to that over the course of the weeks. He hasn't yet established himself here as a Super League player, and already he's been picked up by the NRL. That would be a little bit of a worry. But word is increasingly loud that Vegas will have a Super League element in 2025. It's as Wigan and Warrington are playing each other twice in consecutive weeks. Funnily enough, Wigan and Warrington are the teams that are being rumoured to be going over there. But we need that, don't we? We need that third game that would kick off about midday in Vegas, 9 o'clock here, which would probably mean that'd be 9 o'clock Saturday night, mean that Sky would probably have a slot for that. I think it'd be fantastic if it's going to happen, and if it's for 2 competition points, so it's a meaningful game. Yes, you'll probably have to manage how those 2 teams come in and out of the regular season, and it wouldn't work if one or other or both of them, or one certainly was in the World Club Challenge. Then fantastic that we're even talking about Super League being at Vegas next year.
I think tying that all together, the Vegas thing, the England Samoa, the lack of kind of announcements from the international thing is the other report that's been around about the NRL potentially buying a piece of Super League or investing in Super League. And I mean, for me personally, I think you look at a lot of the issues in the English game at the moment, a lack of marketing or whatever, they just don't have the money. They don't have the cash to invest in the competition to boost it. IMG is, we're not putting money in to do that. They're putting manpower in, but it's more focused on grading than, say, marketing or advertising. But it does, Super League's not back private equity a few years ago, which I think was around the 50 mil mark, Phil, or 30 mil, you might remember. But I think it does make more sense if there is a partnership with the NRL, because then you can get things like the World Club Challenge organised, you can get Vegas organised, you can get international games, you could get a State of Origin at Wembley, you could get, just partnerships that would raise the profile of rugby league in the UK. It does. I mean, America's great, and let's try and crack America. But I think the NRL is starting to come around the idea that they actually need to boost the English market, where they can actually have fans and there are players and there's participants and there's people already interested in rugby league, and it would be a benefit to both competitions to do that.
Can you imagine the Super League game in Vegas? You've got the 2 clubs, whichever they are there. Whichever hangers on will be there as well, because they're always there.
Me, I'll volunteer to go review the game.
Well, I was going to say, not hangers on, but you need the match officials there. You need the match officials, but the video ref can stay home in Wilmslow, so that's a fee saved. So you'd be gutted, wouldn't you? Absolutely gutted. Everyone else is buggering off to Vegas, and then you're in Cheshire. Save some money somehow. Is that it? Is everything done? We all.
I don't think we've touched the Herman SASA thing, but obviously he's gotten off.
Well, he's not guilty. Not guilty. So
he's not guilty. I mean, my understanding. I spoke to someone at the RFL just before we started recording. Hull FC had invested in some special sound recording equipment, which had analysed the audio, and there was there's no doubt that he's not said black anything, which was, I think, the allegation. So it was a misunderstanding. But I mean, there seems to be a lot of people outraged about it, but obviously they need to look into it. They need to investigate things. An allegation was made. They investigated it, and nothing was proven. So the charge is gone. Yeah, I think ideally it could have been wrapped up a bit quicker as opposed to going over for 2 weeks. But yeah, I mean, I think something like serious like this, an allegation is made, you've got to look into it. You can't just ignore it.
You can only follow a process, can't you, James? That's the thing. If unfortunately the process has gone on a bit longer than you'd hope, but that's all you can do.
Yeah, and ultimately, if that's the right outcome, that's the right outcome. And if as you said, you've got to follow the process, and these things do take time. You've got to get statements from both players and surrounding players and the referee, no doubt, and everything else. That does take a little bit of time, but ultimately, if they've arrived at the right outcome, then that's good.
Phil, I'm assuming you'll be at Headingley on Saturday for the double header.
I will, all being well. Yes, I think there's sufficient rugby league this weekend to keep everybody excited. But look out for the streams that aren't the obvious ones, because some of the enjoyment you'll get will be from matches you weren't expecting. Might as well finish as we started. But the Army against Cardiff women's game that went down to the last play of the match, and because there wasn't commentary on it, you literally got the exuberance and the comments from the touchline. It was just a fantastic watch. So if you see any of these links coming up on your social media for a game that perhaps you hadn't expected to see, then look out for it. I mean, one of the wheelchair games on, is it the Red Button? BBC.
I don't know if it's on Red Button or just on the website, but it'll be on the BBC somewhere. You'll be able to watch it.
If you get the chance to watch it, then I would commend you to do so.
If the Army can stream it, I know the Army's got quite a few resources and stuff, but we'll have more soon with National Service. But at the moment, they can.
It's got to say the playing pool will be huge once National Service comes in.
Oh, I'm glad I'm old. What game have you got this week, James? Or do you not know yet?
Not sure. I think it may be Salford London on Sunday. I'm not sure.
Oh. Okay. John, any ideas where you're going to be this week?
I'm at lovely Huddersfield.
Oh,
can't wait.
El Crapico Part 2. That's just good.
Getting to upset somebody. I mean, they give him Huddersfield Lee last week and Salford London this week.
Actually, this is by request because we're going to the coast for the weekend for Harris's birthday. So we're spending the weekend in the caravan. So pray that it's sunny.
Fingers crossed. I mean, I'll be in Sheffield.
You said that.
Pray for sun. Enjoy the week of Rugby League. Thanks for watching and listening. And we'll be back next Monday, probably, to talk about everything. And then build up, of course, to Wembley. Better get me hat ready, haven't I?